is dedicated to you, people. So I lift my head up to the skies and question the heavens, asking why must I go on to live in this violence and crime? Why can't I toil the lands I know and watch all my children's children grow? Why must I go on to live in this violence and crime? Somebody, I didn't get somebody. 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 I didn't get. Oh gosh, a new day begins. And you're feeling down and out. Your problems ahead, don't know yet what they're about. You wish you could die, so the madness could be gone. It's nonsense to hide or run. Something says keep pressing on. A voice in my head, it talks to me. Oh, a voice in my head, it talks to me. Out with the problems, it tells me the road is long. It tells me we must be strong. Roll with the pain and the strife. Today is the start of the rest of your life. Sing it. A voice in my head, it talks to me. A voice in my head. It's running, long, I think it's on the don't, I think it's on, no, I think it's easy. Oh gosh, inside of our homes, poverty still lodging there. You pack up and leave, but you'll find him everywhere. Old man Lottery gives you hope of reaching dreams. But that is as far as we go, cause he knows are too extreme. A voice in my head, it talks to me. A voice in my head, it talks to me. Out with the problems, it tells me the road is long. It tells me we must be strong. Roll with the pain and strife. Today is the start of the rest of your life. Singing. A voice in my head, it talks to me. A voice in my head, it talks to me. Oh gosh. So I lift my head up to the skies and question the heavens, asking why must I go on to live in this violence and crime? Why can't I toil the land I know and watch all my children's children grow? Why must I go on to live in this violence and crime? I get it right. I get it right. Put your hand in the air, wave it with me now. Wave your hand with me now. You've got to wake up and face the world. Every man, child, boy, and girl. You've got to find your purpose in life. Listen, he talked through most of my life. Though I've never seen his face, yeah. But I trust him strong. He could never be replaced, yeah. Though employment law, the white race risen high. It tells me hold on to me dreams, still climb my reach for the sky. A voice in my head, it talks to me. A voice in my head, it talks to me. Out with the problems, it tells me the road is long. It tells me we must be strong. Roll with the pain and strife. Today is the start of the rest of your life. A voice in my head, it talks to me. Oh, question that heaven's asking, why must I go on to live in this fire? I wanna watch my children grow. Why must I go on to live in this violence? A voice in my head, it talks. Keeps my head, don't money, honey get money, don't money, honey get money, don't money, honey get. Oh gosh, a new day begins. And you're feeling down and out. New problems ahead, don't know yet what they're about. You wish you could die, so the madness could be gone. It's nonsense to hide or run. Something says keep pressing on. A voice in my head, it talks to me. A voice it tells me the road is long. It tells me we must be strong. Roll with the pain and the strife. Today is the start of the rest of your life. It talks to me. Out with me problems. The wrong money, and it gets money, wrong money, and it gets money, wrong money, and it gets no, money, and it gets money, wrong money, and it gets money, wrong money, and it gets oh God, inside of our homes, poverty still launching there. You pack up and leave, but you'll find him everywhere. Old man Lottery gives you hope of reaching dreams. But that is as far as we go, 'cause he knows a voice in my head, it talks to me. Out with the problems, it tells me the road is long. It tells me we must be strong. Roll with the pain and strife. Today is the start of the rest of your life. Singing. A voice in my head, it talks to me. A voice in my head, it talks to me. Oh gosh. So I lift my head up to the skies and question the heavens, asking why must I go on to live in this violence and crime? Why can't I toil the land I know and watch all my children's children grow? Why must I go on to live in this violence and crime? To my body get money, put your hand in the air, wave it with me now. Wave your hand with me now. You've got to wake up and face the world. Every man, child, boy, and girl. You've got to find your purpose in life. Listen. He talked to most of my life, though I've never seen his face. Yeah. But I trust him strong. He could never be replaced. Yeah. Though employment low and the divine grace risen high, it tells me hold on to me dreams, still climb, reach for the sky. A voice in my head, it talks to me. A voice in my head, it talks to me. Out with the problems, it tells me the road is long. It tells me we must be strong. Roll with the pain and strife. Today is the start of the rest of your life. A voice in my head, it talks to me. A voice in my head, it talks to me. Oh God. So I lift my head up to the skies and question that heaven's asking why must I go on to live in this violence and crime? Why can't I tie the lands I know and watch my children grow? Why must I go on to live in this violence? A voice in my head, it talks, keeps walking with me. A voice in my head, it's talking, he's walking. Oh gosh, it tells me the road. It tells me we must be strong. Roll with the band and stride. Roll with the band and stride.
Wait, deep, 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 deep. The road may be long, but we've got to be strong. We've got to be strong. We've got to be strong. Those of you who are APNU, the road may be long, but we've got to be strong. Good evening to all of you, and welcome to Politics 101. It's a quiet evening here in Buxton, coming to you from Buxton. A good evening to all of you on the east coast of Demerara who are joining us, all over Guyana, wherever you're joining us. Why must we continue to live in this violence and crime? Jonathan Yearwood from Barbados. The road is long, but we got to be strong. And I know that we are a strong people. We are a strong people. And we're going to see this through. Good evening to all the wonderful people in Linden. Good evening, Marielle. I have to give you a call. I haven't spoken to you in a long time. Good evening to the people in Region 1, Region 2, Region 3, of course, Region 4, Region 5, Region 6, Region 7, Bartica. I know we have lots of Barticians who are joining us. A big shout out to you in Bartica. Region 8, of course, Madia and other places there. Region 9, Lethem, and of course, Linden, Region 10. Good evening, Kokwani. Good evening to you and welcome to Politics 101 on a Wednesday night, midweek. My friend from Cabo said, you know, weekend is prime time. And midweek is dong time. Good evening to you, Mr. Hope, out there in Maryland, and all of you out there in Maryland, my sisters and brothers and many nieces and nephews, my friends, all out there in Maryland. Good evening to you if you join us from Atlanta, Georgia. I was told that it's Hotlanta. Hotlanta, Georgia. After the show last night, I learned that Brother UC Guyana listened to the show last night. And if you're listening tonight, Brother UC, a good evening to you. Jambo and Dugu, I know I talked to you earlier today. And but if you are listening to the show tonight, Jambo and Dugu, and thanks for all that you have done for me, for us, for Guyana, for Buxton, for Africans, for humanity. You are a treasure. 100 years and counting. 100 years and counting. My elder. Good evening to all of you, those of you who are joining us from Buxton. Good evening to you. I don't mean to forget Buxton, but I take it for granted that Buxtonians are on. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to the security chief, um, Mr. Orin Turkey, Mr. Orin Turkey Newton. Um, Welcome to Politics 101 on a Wednesday night. Lots to talk about. Lots to talk about. I want to start tonight by reading the WPA statement. WPA had a press conference today, and pretty good press conference. I want to share with you the statement from that press conference. After careful consideration, WPA joins with most of the political community and other civil society organizations in characterizing the recent national and regional elections as falling far below what is universally considered to be free and credible elections. These elections were neither free nor fair, nor free from fear and political bullying. The electoral system was so compromised that even usually cautious forces, such as the international observer groups, were forced to make that observation in an unambiguous manner. In this regard, GCOM has failed Guyana miserably. That institution has allowed itself to become a partisan tool, thus rendering the election null and void before a single ballot was cast. GCOM has willfully become a creature and a tool of the PPP. The chairperson, who holds the decisive, impartial key, has repeatedly used it to validate the PPP's plan and agenda. It is for that reason that the WPA is hesitant to endorse the call for a change from the current partisan makeup of the commission to one comprising civil society. If the behavior of the chair is reflective of civil society, then a movement in that direction would be as disastrous as what currently obtains. GCOM's stubborn refusal to review the 2020 election in the face of documented instances of fraud meant that the country went into a new election in 2025 with all the wounds which were deliberately left unattended. If the very voters list is patently rigged as ours is, then the notion of a credible election falls flat on its face. If a voters list is as bloated as ours is, then the scope for voter impersonation increases exponentially. Such impersonation was detected at the 2020 election only after there was a forensic recount of the votes. Yet, GCOM refused to introduce the use of biometrics at the 2025 election. The instances of overt and covert vote buying rendered the election a national farce. Even the usually compliant GCOM was forced to issue a cautionary statement, even though it did not do anything to deter the infraction. The large sums of money which were openly on display during the election became a potent weapon against the objective of a free and fair election. Going forward, WPA calls for the strengthening of vote buying laws and clear mechanisms to implement them. For the WPA, the country must come to the end of the road as far as compromise elections are concerned. WPA is ready to play its part in igniting such a movement. No self-respecting country can afford to continue this farce. There must be a national movement for free and fair elections in the form of constitutional and statutory renovation of the electoral system. The arguments for contesting rigged elections are losing their potency. The unusually large number of voters who stayed away from the 2025 elections may well be a reaction to that phenomenon. As part of the APNU, WPA acknowledges the dramatic decrease of electoral support for the coalition. As the country scrambles for quick answers to this development, WPA advises some degree of caution. While the outcomes are self-evident, the causes are not as clear. Hence, it is premature to rush to sweeping conclusions. With the naked political eye, however, WPA has detected some possible factors. These include vote buying and the failure to go to the election as a grand coalition. But WPA feels that the deliberate demonization of the APNU presidential candidate as unfit for the role as presidential candidate had its desired effect. Another factor was the feeling among the base that the APNU stint in office yielded nothing of consequence for them. Finally, WPA acknowledges that the lack of militancy against the manifest excesses over the last 5 years may have had an impact on voter migration and those who stayed away from the polls. Having made the above observations, WPA recommends a listening campaign to learn from voters the actual reasons for their seemingly dramatic decision. WPA intends to be part of this undertaking as part of the APNU and in its own name. As part of a pre-election pact with APNU, WPA was awarded a seat in the National Assembly and has asked Dr. David Hinds to take up that seat. Contrary to what is bandied around in some quarters, David Hinds was not appointed by Aubrey Norton. David Hinds does not represent the PNC. As leader of the list, and in keeping with the pact, Aubrey Norton offered the WPA one seat and the WPA accepted it. It is the only representative that WPA would have in the National Assembly and in the regional councils. And WPA intends to use this opportunity to support the APNU parliamentary agenda, as well as advocate for its causes within the National Assembly and in the wider society. These include poverty alleviation, constitutional reform, education overhaul, the equitable distribution of oil wealth, and the prudent use of that wealth in pursuit of socio-economic transformation. Although the opposition's role in a winner-take-all parliament is limited, WPA intends to use its seat to help restore some popular confidence in that institution. We intend to help raise the quality of the debate and to pursue a regime of accountability by the government. Further, WPA intends to lead by example in an effort to move the National Assembly in the direction of a real co-equal branch of government with inherent and explicit oversight powers. End of statement. That was the WPA statement that was issued this morning at the press conference. And at that press conference, of course, a number of questions were posed. And one of the questions that was posed by the media was whether WPA had any proof or has any proof of rigging. And the answer is that we don't have any proof in a physical way in front of us. But our argument is the system is flawed. The system is rigged. And a rigged system cannot produce free and fair elections. Only a fair system can produce free and fair elections. As we pointed out in the statement, we only learned of the widespread rigging in 2020 when the boxes were opened and the votes in the boxes were examined against those that went into the boxes. So when you go into the polling station, you present your ID, they check and find your name, and then they call your number, they give you a ballot paper, you go in, you vote, you throw it in the box. When the boxes were open in 2020, we found that hundreds, thousands of people whose ballots appeared in the boxes were not ticked off. What it meant is that they did not physically go to the polling station. And we were able to send samples of that to the immigration office. And the immigration office, in one instance, for example, found that 75% of the sample that was sent, 75% of the people were not in the country on election day. We were able to detect that fraud only with a forensic recount. That is, you go into the boxes to determine whether the votes in the boxes were valid or not. We have good reason to believe that the same thing occurred in 2025. And when we ask for a forensic audit or a forensic recount, GCOM chair told Mr. Norton to go to a petition. She knows very well that in 2020, we were able to detect fraud when we opened the boxes and checked each and every vote to make sure it was a valid vote. We suspect that a number of Commonwealth citizens who did not meet the residency requirement of 1 year voted. We cannot prove that unless we open the boxes and find those votes and then check with the relevant authorities to see whether those people had been or have been residing in Guyana for a year and more. We rather suspect that a lot of them, hundreds of them, voted as Commonwealth citizens when they did not meet the residency requirement of 1 year. And the residency requirement said they must be domiciled in Guyana. It doesn't mean that they must visit Guyana for a year. Domicile means that you live here and intend to make here your place of abode, whether to work or just to live in a different place. But if you come in to work as a migrant worker and you work here for 11 months or even 12 months, and then you leave and go way back to Bangladesh, that does not qualify you because you're not domiciled. You have to be domiciled. And we rather suspect that that Commonwealth vote was abused. But we could only know that if we go in the boxes, fish out the votes, and find out whether those people met the domicile requirement. The same is true of other immigrants from Venezuela and Brazil. As you know, birth certificates, which was a difficult thing to get at one time, they passed legislation to make it easy to distribute birth certificate. And the birth certificate, of course, could be used as a source document. All you have to do is to produce a birth certificate and say you're born in Guyana, and that's it. Nobody there to check whether that is true or not. So our answer this morning was that it is not the kind of election where rigging takes place on election day. It is a system that is rigged, and it allows for the rigging to take place long before election day. One asks, if you want to extract 500,000 people from a list of 700,000, why don't you go through an exercise, house to house registration, and to make sure that the people on that list are people who are eligible to vote? Why you're not making an effort to get the dead people? Lots of people are dead overseas. Why you're not making an effort to get them off? And it's not a case of invalidating people who live overseas. That is not the intention. If you live overseas and you're a Guyanese, yes, the court says that you are entitled to remain on the list. All we are saying is come home, register, so we know that you're alive. If you live in Queens or Brooklyn, we cannot assume that you're alive. If you come home during the registration period and you register, then we have a sense that you're alive. No effort was made by GCOM to cleanse that list. So when you have over 200,000, over 150,000 people who should not be on the list, that 150 is a pool from which you can do voter impersonation. People are now finding out that when they signed up for the cash grant, 100,000, and they commandeered you to give your ID number and all those things, that in effect was a ploy to tamper with the election. So many of you got calls from Freedom House, from the PPP, based on your information that you gave for the cash grant. And it was during that cash grant that they would have found out how many people were not in the country or do not live in the country on election day, do not live in the country on the quarantine or West Bobbies. And then those people who were not here to register at the time of the cash grant, they realize that those people may be overseas. And so they get people to vote for them. That cash grant registration was loaded. Loaded. It gave them your information for them to call you and try to buy your vote. Because that's what they were calling for, to buy your vote. And then it gave them a sense in their strongholds like Region 6 to know that a lot of the people, and they said it, there were plenty empty homes. There are plenty empty homes in Region 6. Well, they know who lived in those homes. And they produce ID card for them and give to somebody. We are able to prove those things only when we open the boxes. So when the media asked the WPA this morning for the evidence, it is what the lawyers would call circumstantial evidence, but it's evidence, nevertheless, that the rigging obtains in the system. In the system. And I think the international observers themselves recognize that. So, sisters and brothers, when we say the elections are rigged, we are on solid ground. It is not because you're not able to point out that X person voted twice, that it means that X person did not vote twice. We knew that X person voted twice in 2020. In 2020. You can't want it both ways. In 2020, the PPP said that they saw rigging. GCOM did not tell them go to a petition. They went to court, and the court told GCOM to correct the rigging. GCOM decided to open the boxes. And when they opened the boxes, they saw rigging in reckless abundance. We have reached the point in our country where we cannot continue to have elections that are rigged before the day of polling. So many Guyanese were disenfranchised. Prisoners on remand. You're registered to vote. You get in trouble on the 28th of August. You're remanded to prison. Elections are 4 days later. You lose your right to vote because you're remanded to prison. You're not convicted of any crime. You get into a fight. The matter goes to court. You don't have money to pay your bail. You're remanded. You lose your right to vote. You're not convicted of any crime. They may say, if you're convicted of a crime, you lose your right to vote. That's not part of Guyana's law. But they may make that argument. But what about those who are in remand, who are not convicted of any crime? So many people were disenfranchised. And GCOM did that. The biggest crime in these elections was vote buying. And GCOM said vote buying is a crime that should be prosecuted. We saw at least 2 parties engage in open, naked vote buying. Naked vote buying. We understand the PPP spent $30 billion. A lot of that went into vote buying. They targeted the vulnerable communities for vote buying. We understand there's evidence that on election day, representatives of these parties were going house to house and paying people to go out and vote. Nothing hides these days on social media. Vote buying is a very dangerous thing. Very dangerous. Once people are enticed to trade their votes for money, it is very difficult to turn back that tide. What it means now is that elections are no longer about conscience. You're voting your conscience. You are voting because a party represents the way you think, or you're voting for a party because it represents the way you look. Those are all valid, fundamental reasons why people vote for parties. All of that is going to be now pushed into the background, and people are going to vote for who can pay them the most for that vote. When you look at the PPP, which has a party war chest, because it gives contracts to people, big contracts. They give $100 million contract to a contractor. That contractor immediately gives $20 million to the PPP because he's making a hefty $50 million from that contract, gives $20 million to the PPP, maybe spend $30 million in material and labor, and he comes home with $50 million. He can afford to give the PPP $20 million. So the PPP got a big war chest from bribery, official bribery. And then it was able to use state resources, whether it's gasoline, whether it's using vehicles. These are all worth money. And so the PPP could afford to spend $30 billion. Could afford. It gets most of that from contracts, from state resources. They don't have to go in their pockets. And so they have an advantage over other parties because of their control of government. They're able to get bribes. They're able to get what they call big donations. And then they have access to the state coffers. They give you a 40,000 a day part-time workers. That money comes from the state coffers. And then they use those workers to campaign for them. Undue advantage. And that is rigging. So if we don't do something dramatic in Guyana, we are going to reach the point where elections would become more farcical than it is at the moment. It's already a farce. And if election time is when people are prepared to have a payday, then elections are no longer democratic. That is why WPA is urging that we have strong anti-vote buying laws, and that people must be prosecuted for engaging in vote buying. It's not enough for GCOM to say that vote buying is a crime. It ought to be able to draw the law-making authorities to the instances of this crime. We shall see. We were also asked this morning to comment on the matter of the GCOM commissioners, the opposition commissioners, opposition nominated commissioners, because they're not opposition commissioners. They were nominated by the opposition, appointed by the president, and they're constitutional officers with tenure. And the new opposition leader is saying that he should be able to name new commissioners. He should be able to name new commissioners. And our contention is that we see nothing in the law, absolutely nothing in the law, that says that a new opposition leader coming in should be able to name new commissioners. There is nothing in the rules of GCOM. You see, you can have the law, but GCOM as an autonomous body can make its own rules. There is absolutely nothing in GCOM rules that say when you have a new opposition leader, then he or she can recall the commissioners. Now, in 2015, when APNU AFC won that election, Jack Dio became the new opposition leader. According to Mohammed's logic, then Jack Dio should have called for the resignation of the three commissioners, Desmond Trotman, Mr. Corbyn, and Vincent Alexander, because Jack Dio became the new opposition leader in 2015. And if we follow Mohammed's logic, then Jack Dio should have said, I should be able to replace. What that would have done, it meant the PPP would have had control of 6 commissioners if we follow this man's logic or those who are advising him. So there is nothing that says a new opposition leader must be able to appoint new commissioners. Desmond Trotman, who was on the WPA panel this morning, said quite correctly that it is a matter for the courts, judicial review. Mr. Mohammed should be able to go to the court and ask the court to rule on this matter, to say whether when there is a new opposition leader, he changes the so-called opposition commissioners. That is going to be the matter before the court. And the court will have to make a ruling based on the statutory authorities, that is the law. It will have to make a ruling based on the Constitution. And it will have to take into consideration whether GCOM's laws allow for that. We shall see. We shall see. The media ask whether moral reasoning or moral suasion could be used, meaning whether we can appeal to the morals of the 3 commission, ask them to resign. Morals are good. But if we substitute individual morals for the law, where would we end up? We will start by substituting good morals, and then we will end up substituting bad morals for the law. And so one has to be very careful about this moral argument, because there are good morals and there are bad morals. And when morals are allowed to substitute the law, you may be saying, well, then let us govern society by way of morals. And the reason we have government, it is because, as I think Hobbes said, mankind in its natural state, his life will be short, nasty, and brutish. Meaning that human beings are not necessarily as moral as we think they ought to be. That human beings have a selfish streak. It doesn't mean that human beings are inherently selfish. I don't think so. But we do have a selfish streak. And so therefore this thing called government was created to mediate, to save us from ourselves, so to speak. If human beings were always good, always reasonable, and always moral, there would be no need for government. No need for this Levitian, as they call them in the literature. This Levitian to come in and to save us from ourselves. If we could live without fighting each other, without killing each other, then there'll be no need for the police force. If we all could stop at the traffic, at the four corners, and reasonably allow one car to go, then the next one to go, and the next one, there'll be no need for a traffic police. But of course, that's not how we operate in normal life. And so we need government. When the government becomes oppressive, then of course we have the right to recall and remove that government. Because we give the government authority to mediate. And we create frameworks in which they should mediate. That is the law, the legal framework in which government must operate. Which brings me to my next point tonight. Yesterday, the president had a press conference. Lord help me. I didn't listen to it because my patience can grow a little thin sometimes listening to that chap. But he had a press conference and he invited media that he thinks are friendly to him. But he excluded a number of media houses that they have been saying repeatedly are hostile to them. They excluded Stabroek News. Stabroek News was not invited. They invited an individual reporter from Stabroek News, but not Stabroek News. And the way the newspaper thing works, or the media thing works, is that the editor decides who represents the paper at a media conference, not the person who is calling the press conference. And so a number of media houses were disinvited from the press conference. Now that's a serious development. We condemned, WPA condemned this morning, and we condemn now that action by the government. That's a serious violation of natural law. The media are an important aspect of any democratic process. The media are there to ask questions that the lady selling at the corner of the street, making a living, or the man in the back dam farming, does not get to ask the government. the media ask questions for him or her. And so, in silencing the media, you are silencing people. In America, they refer to the media as the fourth estate. You have three branches of government: the judiciary, the executive, and the legislative branches. And then you have the media. And that man, on the very first week of a new government, in the face of criticism by Reporters Without Borders, in the face of criticism by the international observers of the election that the media are being bullied, in the face of all of that, the man and his government have begun to bully media people all over again. No, none of us political people are always happy with the media. Stabroek News, for example, has not covered the WPA for over a decade. In the last 5 years, they have not covered us. They don't come to our press conferences. They don't cover us. But that does not mean that we in the WPA will stand for discrimination against Stabroek News or any media house. And so we find that what the president did yesterday is really a signal of things to come. It is very clear that the PPP is not interested in fair play, is not interested in democratizing the society, is not interested in making Guyana a place that is free from official bullying. If Stabroek News is critical of the PPP, so be it. Stabroek News doesn't cover WPA. Stabroek News may be critical and is critical of other political parties. But does that mean that you will bully them and don't give them access? Stabroek News has readers who depend on that paper for information. By refusing to invite Stabroek News and the others to a press conference, you are denying citizens access to information, which is a violation of the law. It's a violation of human rights. And so here we go again, after another rigged election. After all the condemnations, the government comes in and continues on its merry way. How much longer can we continue with this? How much longer? The government continues to push. This is not a government with 50 out of 69, 65 seats. This is a government that barely has a majority. Barely. And it got that majority because a number of people stayed away from the polls. They increased their votes by 10,000, I think they say 10,000 votes or thereabout. But actually it's less than that, because they had 34 seats, 33 plus the one from the join the list. So when you add the join the votes, they got in 2020, and the PPP vote in 2020. Really, they may have just increased their votes by 4,000 or thereabout, 5,000, not 10,000 as they're saying. And so they barely won a rigged election, barely prevailed in a rigged election, but they are behaving as though they want a landslide. Even critic, somebody sent me a clip. He said he don't believe the PPP won by a landslide. The PPP slide in. And he's correct. Critic is not usually correct on many things when it comes to the PPP, but he's correct on that. And so here we are. They predicted a landslide. They predicted a 2/3 majority. Let me here congratulate two of my friends, James Bond, who is now a PPP MP. I congratulate James. You work hard and you are rewarded. I congratulate Leonard Craig. I think he is in Parliament too. I think so. I can't remember seeing his name, but I think it may be squeezed in somewhere. And so I congratulate Leonard. You work hard and you are rewarded. I think those two men deserve to be in Parliament. They have what it is to be parliamentarians. They have the intellect. They are not fringes. They are at the center of politics. Leonard Craig is at the center of politics. He's not on the fringe. The housewife who has to struggle to feed her children when the day comes, she's on the fringe of society. The young men and women in the inner city in Georgetown and Linen and other places that are quote unquote scraping to make a living, they're on the fringe. So when my friend Leonard talks about the fringe, he's talking about most of Guyana, who are on the fringes of the economy, the fringe of society. And I think sometimes people use words and terms, and the teacher in me is tempted to say, please shut up and go and don't use words. Understand that words represent concept, the concept of the fringe. The slave was at the fringe of society for 400 years. The indentured laborer was at the fringe of society for over 100 years, for almost 100 years and more. And yet a man sits down there and David Hinds is on the fringe. Somebody who gave this country 50 years of his life, who has contributed to his country, who had the good fortune to go to school, and is on the fringe. These chaps ought to stop using the people words and learn that words are often concepts. Learn concepts. I don't think Leonard Craig is in I was making fun of him just now. I don't think he's in he's in Parliament. He's going to Parliament. So he's on the fringe of Parliament. He's on the fringe of the PPP. Yet he sits there and calls people fringe. I love Leno, but this is what I am talking about. These chaps are helping to devalue our society. All of us are on the fringe, except the small elite who monopolize power, whether it's economic power, political power, cultural power. And yet that man sits there and believes that he's part of that elite. And as George Chambers, after Rick Williams died and he took over the PNM at the next election, he said, not one damn seat for them, meaning the opposition. And I can quote George Chambers and say to my friend Leonard Craig, not one damn seat for you. And yet you sit there and call people fringe. But that's where we end up when we are not very careful and we think we are too smart and we are too intelligent. We are too intelligent. We think so. You know, I mean, you sit down there and call people who have contributed to this society, who have made it possible for you to have the freedom to open your mouth, to speak in public as a dark-skinned boy, and you call them fringe. Yet, when people call you name, you go on bad and say you never hear such lewdness in your life. And there you are, calling people's names. But congratulations, Leno, you're on the fringe of the PPP's delegation to Parliament. Congratulations. At least James, not in the fringe. He's in Parliament. Congratulations, James. Sisters and brothers, we have to take charge of this society because it's been destroyed. The fabric of this society is being destroyed. Reason had gone through the window. We are no longer civil to each other. Ignorance becomes intelligence. We cannot go on this way. And we have to make an effort. All of us. All of us. You can be a member of your party. That's a good thing. Join a party is a good thing. It's a good thing. But when you become a member of a party, don't feel that you have to lose yourself. Don't feel you have to lose yourself and become something the opposite of what you used to be. Lady met me in Georgetown yesterday on Regent Street. She held on to me and started to cry. She said, Dr. Hinds, I'm not yet over the shock of the APNU's defeat. And now, these APNU members are resigning from the party. What are they telling me? They told me for 5 years that the PPP was the devil. And now they are with the devil. Only a few weeks ago, she said they were on the platform telling me to vote for them. And now they are leaving the cause. I don't want to get into PNC internal story. I'm just telling you what this lady, who obviously is an admirer, member, supporter of the PNC/APNU. And I reflected on what that lady said, and it occurred to me what I always know, that is, we political people, our actions have consequences not only for ourselves, but for people. That lady is emotionally disturbed by the actions of politicians. And the politicians, I don't think, often are thinking that when I take an action, it has consequences for thousands of people, tens of thousands of people. And I want to advise our political people, especially the younger ones, that you can cause people to get heart attack by your individual actions. Our young people, some of them have left APNU, and people say they exercise their democratic right, and that is true. But they could be causing, and they are causing, their mothers and fathers some terrible issues and problems, tears. Individual action could have consequences beyond the individual. Especially we can excuse the young people who voted for Win because I'm sure they have rational arguments. But those of us who are leaders, our actions too have great impact. There is a certain program says that David Hinds doesn't have one supporter in the entire Guyana. Yet every single program, they spend at least half the program talking about David Hinds. And I understand. I understand why. And they understand why. What they're doing is trying to delegitimize us. Do you realize that there is more interest in the list of parliamentarians for APNU than there is for a PPP or for Win? And PPP and Win got more votes than APN. But everybody is interested in the APNU list of parliamentarians. All of them who didn't vote are telling the APNU who they must send to parliament. And they're not telling the PPP, or Win. And the reason is that they know the APNU, lose, win, or draw, is a force. Is a force to reckon with. They know that. And what they want is to bury and silence a lot of us. All the noise they're making, David Hinds going to parliament, he should not be in parliament. They're afraid of me in parliament. I don't know why. I'm a nice guy. They shouldn't be afraid of me. I know nothing about nothing. I influence nobody. Then let me go in parliament and make myself a jackass. No, they don't want me in parliament. He's a dual citizen. He this, he that. So even when we are at our lowest ebb in terms of electoral support, they fear us. They fear us. And they fear us because in a time of unreason, we represent more reason than them. In a time of untrustworthiness, we represent more trust than them. We have gotten it right. So many people inbox me today and say thanks for explaining what voting patterns are. Thanks for explaining. And one man put it bluntly, Dr. Hinds, you make me look stupid. And I said, why? And he wrote that, how can I stupidly feel that Mohammed is leading 100,000 black people and he's not a black leader, or his party is not a black party? The thing is so elementary. It's so elementary. It's so elementary. So, sisters and brothers, we are on it. I think they got the thing tonight, cricket now, and I know a lot of us. I'm not a big T20 man, but it's the craze, and I know you are into that. So we stop here for tonight, and we'll come back tomorrow night, and we shall continue the discussion. At some point, I want us to discuss this crazy notion of the minority government that some people have been talking about or had been talking about. We'll talk a little bit about that. The news today is that Brother Nigel has resigned as leader of the PPP. And as you all know, I have a soft spot for Nigel. And I did everything, not directly, but indirectly, to try to persuade Nigel that his place and the AFC's place was in a grand coalition. We didn't make it. And I think Nigel did what decent leaders do. Decent leaders do. And that is to take responsibility for the loss and resign. Aubrey Norton did what decent leaders do, to take responsibility for the decline in votes, and he's not going to Parliament. And we must congratulate those two brothers for taking responsibility. And Nigel, I think, is an asset and will continue to be an asset to Guyana, to the struggle. But our politics can be very vicious. And you make one wrong turn in politics, and it could spell the unexpected for you. And all of us have made wrong turns in politics, and we live to fight another day. And I'm sure Nigel will continue to make his contribution to our country and to the struggle of our people. I'll see you all tomorrow night, and I hope the Warriors prevail tonight. I think they're playing in the playoffs.